2, 1.
This date of November 22nd, 2017 marks the 54th anniversary of the JFK assassination in Dallas, Texas. By now, a 1992 National Archives law had mandated that all of the thousands of documents and photographs from the murder investigation would be released to the American public by October 26, 2017. But the CIA and the FBI are still blocking the release of thousands of records. Why? The answer appears to be in the power struggles of President John F. Kennedy and his powerful CIA director, Allen Welsh Dulles, who had been a major player in the agency for 10 years before Kennedy became president. In this and the following three of the reports that we're going to do today, JFK's assassination and covert operations and the UFO cover-up are tied together. Allen Dulles and his CIA colleagues were concerned when Fidel Castro was sworn in as Prime Minister of Cuba on February 16, 1959, after leading a guerrilla campaign that forced right-wing dictator Fulgencio Batista into exile. Castro wanted communism and strong economic collaboration with the Soviet Union that was a Cold War enemy of the United States. That provoked the creation of American anti-Castro forces backed by the CIA. Former General Dwight D. Eisenhower was still U.S. president, and by March of 1960, he had allocated $13.1 million to the CIA to plan Castro's overthrow. 1 year later, President Eisenhower departed the White House as John Fitzgerald Kennedy was inaugurated as the 35th President of the United States on January 20th, 1961. Allen Dulles, as CIA director, was also MJ1 in the Majestic 12 group originally created by President Harry Truman in 1947 to oversee the highly secret investigations and back engineering of extraterrestrial technologies retrieved from crash sites such as Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 and in the years beyond. Allen Dulles was both MJ1 and director of the CIA in 1960, when he and Lieutenant General John Sanford, director of the NSA, both approved on September 4, 1960, to reclassify the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit summary intelligence that nobody in the public had ever heard about. And they reclassified it top secret ultra with a large magic stamp in the warning, only those persons with magic access may have access. And you can see this document very clear. I've gotten a very clear copy at my Earthfiles.com website in the 4 reports about the JFK assassination that I have posted on this date of November 22nd. I urge all of you to go through those Earthfiles.com reports, see these documents. They are legitimate and real. And also, for those of you who subscribe to Earthfiles, those links that I have to other reports that I have done related to the JFK assassination are really worth reading. Now, in this IPU summary that the Dulles and Sanford agree that they're going to reclassify it and they're going to put this magic stamp on it, and the only people in the world that will ever have access to this document will be people with a magic access. Presumably, not even an elected official such as the President of the United States would automatically have that magic clearance. But certainly, Allen Dulles and President Dwight D. Eisenhower had full access to magic stamp documents about extraterrestrial craft and entities, both dead and alive, retrieved by military teams specially trained for at least 1947 onward. And these retrieval teams were dealing with getting technology, getting bodies dead, and the few live there were very, very strict rules about what they were to do, and that is contained in some of these documents that I have at earthfiles.com. Now, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, would he have been told everything about the UFO and ET secret upon his inauguration as the 35th President of the United States on January 20th, 1961? Would he have known anything about the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit? Would he have ever been shown this summary that has information about the retrieval of bodies as well as craft, and finding at one of the crash sites near Roswell bodies dissected as one would a frog, without explaining whether the bodies found dissected were animal, human, or alien? Only 2.5 months later, on April 4th, JFK approved a final Cuba invasion plan that Allen Dulles of CIA had developed over the preceding year for its CIA-sponsored paramilitary group, Brigade 2506, that created the paramilitary Democratic Revolutionary Front known as the DRF. Its goal, and the CIA's goal, was to get rid of Castro and his Soviet allies in Cuba that were so close to the United States. But the April 1961 CIA paramilitary invasion was overwhelmed by Castro forces. As the U.S. involvement became apparent to the world because it was American B-26 bombers that were attacking the Cuban airfields, President Kennedy decided to stop the U.S. air cover. And that meant the Bay of Pigs that the CIA and the military had planned as an invasion had only half the air forces that Dulles and his counterintelligence director, James Jesus Angleton, had counted on. Ultimately, Dulles was fired by Kennedy a few months later in November 1961, along with the deputy CIA director, Charles Cabell, and whose brother, Earl Cabell, was mayor of Dallas, Texas. And in some of the most recent documents that have been released by the archive, for the first time we learn that Earl Cabell was a CIA asset. So he and his brother could work together for CIA matters. And that must have been very convenient later on in terms of planning the assassination of President Kennedy in Dallas. Well, now he fires Dulles and he fires Cabell, and he replaces Dulles with a man named John McCone, who everybody agrees was really a bureaucratic functionary. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion helped to strengthen Castro's leadership, made him a national hero, and gave Cuba a communist government allied with the Soviet Union. This eventually is what led to the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 and the assassination of President Kennedy on November 22, 1963, and the proposed or alleged reason that is becoming clearer and clearer as each year passes is that the assassination was strategized, organized, and executed by CIA power brokers that included the mastermind of Allen Welsh Dulles. When Dulles was fired, the speculation is that he secretly remained MJ1 in the Majestic 12 group to oversee the highly secret investigations and back engineering of extraterrestrial technologies retrieved from crash sites such as Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, but many other places in the United States and beyond the United States. Speculation is that Allen Dulles was angry after he had been fired in 1961, and he continued in that even more powerful position of MJ1 in Majestic 12 that Kennedy may have not known at all. And that what was happening in the Kennedy side that was making Dulles more and more angry is that Kennedy wanted to break the Cold War. He wanted to move toward peaceful collaboration with the Soviet Union, especially in space, and was even ready to propose a joint mission to the moon with what essentially would be the Soviet Union, Russia, and what we had at first considered to be an enemy coming out of World War II. Well, reinforcing all of this are two extremely important documents that President John Kennedy had prepared on the same date, November 12, 1963. That was only 10 days before he would die in that motorcade in Dallas. One of the two documents is classified top secret memorandum for the director, and it's director of the CIA, and strangely, the name is blacked out. If it were McCone that JFK had appointed after he fired Dulles, why wouldn't it simply say to the director, John McCone, director of the CIA? It is a puzzle. The subject is classification review of all UFO intelligence files affecting national security. This is no joke. This is a document. You can see the clear, clean document that I have at Earthfiles. UFO intelligence files affecting national security. President Kennedy writes, quote, "As I had discussed with you," and we think he's talking about McCone, after Dulles was fired in 1961 and until Kennedy died on November 22nd, 1963, he appointed John McCone to be the functionary director of the CIA. So it is very strange that we don't know exactly why this is blacked out, but we're presuming that Kennedy is writing to his appointee, John McCone. As I discussed with you previously, I have initiated, another name is blacked out, and have instructed James Webb, the famous astronomer, to develop a program with the Soviet Union in joint space and lunar exploration. It would be very helpful if you would have the high threat cases, meaning high threat UFO cases, reviewed with the purpose of identification of bona fide, meaning legitimate, as opposed to classified CIA and U.S. Air Force sources. The implication is he is not trusting anything that's coming to him from the CIA and the Air Force. It is important that we make a clear distinction between the knowns and the unknowns, again referring to UFOs, in the event that the Soviets try to mistake our extended cooperation as a cover for intelligence gathering of their defense and space programs. When this data has been sorted out, I would like you to arrange a program of data sharing with NASA, where unknown UFOs are a factor. This will help NASA mission directors in their defensive responsibilities. That word defensive. It is very clear that in 1963, John F. Kennedy has now been exposed to the concept of UFO phenomena, some friendly and some not friendly, and they are working and worrying about defensive measures and whether or not they can talk with the Soviets about high threat cases. John F. Kennedy writes, "I would like an interim report on the data review no later than February 1st, 1964, signed John F. Kennedy, next to Kennedy's signature line you can see in the document at earthfiles.com. There is a brief, visible, loopy handwritten note from James Jesus Angleton that seems to be acknowledging the memo's directive, but whatever else had been written in the bottom of the page is totally blacked out." On the same day, November 12, 1963, President Kennedy also sent a National Security Action Memorandum number 271 for the administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which is NASA, on the subject of cooperation with the USSR on outer space matters. President Kennedy's memo begins, quote, "I would like you, NASA Administrator, to assume personally the initiative and central responsibility with the government for the development of a program of substantive cooperation with the Soviet Union in the field of outer space, including the development of specific technical proposals. These proposals should be developed with a view to their possible discussion with the Soviet Union as a direct outcome of my September 20th, 1963 proposal for broader cooperation between the United States and the USSR in outer space, including cooperation in lunar landing programs," close quote. John F. Kennedy, we hadn't been to the moon yet, and he was going to try to make this a breakthrough, break the Cold War, shake hands with the Soviets, who at least had advanced technologies themselves, work together, neutralize war, move in peace, and go as a goal to the moon together. 10 days later, on November 22nd, 1963, Jack Ruby was in Dallas, Texas, before JFK's big motorcade through Dealey Plaza. And now, one of the revelations in just the last week from the most recent document dumps has an informant, was an FBI informant, and a document in which it says that Ruby, whether he knew this man to be an FBI informant or not, but the implication is he did, that Ruby said to this man, quote, "Watch the fireworks today," close quote. And this was only a few hours before the rifle bullets killed the President of the United States. I think it is so important for those who are coming to the Earthfiles YouTube channel to realize that what I have just said in a kind of formal script, if you go into the search bar at earthfiles.com, and in that white search blank, just type in MJ1 or Majestic 12 and see all of the reports that I have done since 1999, with document pages that we have been able to get from one whistleblower especially, and that goes back to the 90s when Bob Wood, aerospace engineer, was negotiating with a man named Tim Cooper, whose father had worked in the printing press at White Sands. We've talked a little bit about this before in the Earthfiles YouTube channel. But I feel like that I'm in the process constantly of trying to weave together these thousands and thousands of threads that have been out there in the last 70 years from World War II on as separate pieces, and now for the very first time an enormous number of the puzzle pieces are beginning to come together in front of us in focus of a pattern and a picture. And it's becoming very clear that the UFO ET Majestic 12 initiative that started with President Harry S. Truman in 1947, the same year that he created the Central Intelligence Agency with the goal that it would be his intelligence collection agency. And by the time we get into the 60s, the CIA is being turned into a assassinate government leaders that we don't like in other parts of the world. It's becoming a psychological warfare expert. And in these new reports at earthfiles.com, the fourth, part 4, is about a strange character named George Joannides. And when you realize that there is even currently now, reporters have gone to court trying to get a CIA repressed folder on Joannides, and that there appears to be even a connection between him and the assassination of Kennedy and directly with Oswald, and what was Joannides doing for the CIA. He was the chief of psychological warfare for a very special unit in Miami, Florida. All these pieces in the 4-part Earthfiles, if you start reading all that I have reported about MJ1, when you start actually having the documents, and it takes time, this is not easy to do. I'm going to hope that coming to the Earthfiles YouTube channel that I'm cutting through the time for you and trying to join and weave some of this. But tonight, what I'm hoping is that everybody who is here watching and listening, that you will understand that we are taking a very, very important step, I think, because I, too, am for the first time beginning to feel convinced. Before it was fuzzy, alleged. I'm beginning to be convinced that my introduction is going to the heart of the truth about why John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Dulles, Allen Dulles, presumed that his power as MJ1, appointed by the Majestic 12 group, starting with President President Truman going to Eisenhower, that there was a line of batons being passed there where everybody was thinking the same thing. And Allen Dulles comes into that mix. And that the UFO ET subject was considered to be a threat to national security. And therefore, when you get to Dulles versus Kennedy in 1961 over the Bay of Pigs, and then Kennedy by 63 in November is saying to the CIA, I want us to open up dialogue with the Soviet Union, and I want to share these high alert UFO cases, and I want us to go to the moon together. That would have been to Allen Dulles, still operating, we think, as head of Majestic 12, even if he was fired from the position of being director of the Central Intelligence Agency. That Dulles would have argued that his position and his charge to keep the world from knowing anything about UFOs and ETs was a priority over the life of the President of the United States, who he would have interpreted as challenging that authority. Now, there's a whole other subtext here in which in just the last few years there have been some people suggesting that in on all of this, maybe even to the side, was the Vice President Lyndon Baines Johnson, who apparently in some people's perspective literally hated John F. Kennedy. And that he would have had sympathy for anybody in the CIA who said, we now have a president that is a danger to our national security. And they would come up with a plan working together, and that it would have been in the context that they were preserving the national security of the United States. Strangely, today, there is something like a parallel that we're having these kinds of discussions when it comes to what is happening in the geopolitical territorial conflicts of today's world, where we are worrying about the possibility of some kind of a nuclear attack from a country on the other side of the world, and a president who is making sounds that he would even allow or that we could go into a nuclear attack. It's almost as if those old questions of what priorities in national security would justify any kind of a political assassination from my point of view, and I'm sure from your point of view, we don't even think that way. But tonight, I'm trying to take you through the first steps of this weaving that I'm beginning to see with some other people, why and how those forces could have evolved to that terrible day on November 22nd, 1963, and then why the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the CIA, working together, are still saying to the current President Trump, we can't allow, and it's thousands, they're still protecting thousands of documents, and saying that they don't want them to come out before 2038. What could be in the documents related to what I have gone over tonight that if they were laid out to all of us, that we would see this truth and perhaps other things that would shock us? 2038. Will they get away with keeping all of these other thousands of documents that were supposed to by law have come out in October? Are they really going to succeed in keeping all of these taxpayer paid efforts and everything behind the documents from us till 2038? There's other information that has been reported in the New York Times that suggests that there will have to be the entire revelation of all of the withheld documents to date out in April of 2018. So that's only a few months. What will happen is going to be another one of those clocks. We're going to tick down. And meanwhile, I hope by the time, let's say, that they get out a whole lot more by April 2018, that you will have had a chance to go into Earthfiles, into all of the majestic 12 MJ1 documents, and see and read these reports I've done for yourself, so that by the time more documents do come out, you will be seeing with your own mind's eye how these pieces are beginning to come into focus more and more, that what has been driving the political, the black underbelly, the secret space program, the missing trillions out of the Defense Department, all of it goes to the heart of MJ1 trying to keep the world from knowing about UFOs, ET, and the back engineering of advanced technology. And that maybe all of that is crumbling, and maybe what we are beginning to experience for the very first time are these green sprouts of some kind of truth and facts that are beginning to grow out of the rotting crumble of all these lies. That's what I hope in all my work at Earthfiles and in my books, radio, television, that we're going to live to get some truth. Now, I'm going to shift gears over to more headlines yesterday related to earlier Earthfiles YouTube report that I was doing about all of the booms. And it was only a week ago that we were talking about what had been happening in Alabama and some other places and what happened yesterday. It's interesting that this is coming from the UK and not an American paper. It's the Daily Mail, and the headline, "What is causing the mysterious booms heard in 64 locations around the world in just this year alone, 2017? When I saw that headline, I thought, wow, I have been reporting about these booms since January of 2011 for 6 years. I have done maps and accumulating maps in the United States and Canada at least. And I have tried to interview people in New Zealand and Australia and England and Norway and Sweden and wherever I could get people who would be willing to go on the record about what they have experienced. And I wonder why it is that it is taken till November 2017 for something like the Daily Mail to put this big headline, nothing sarcastic, no jokes, serious. What is causing the mysterious booms heard in 64 locations around the world this year, as if they assigned somebody to keep a tally? Another possible sign that we're at a new frontier. Maybe we're going to finally start seeing that, whether it's in the assassination, that at the heart of it has UFOs and ETs being suppressed, or what's going to come through astronomers about things like the fast radio bursts, that maybe what's going to happen in this year of 2018 that has been pulsing out there as a significant year for a long time, maybe we're going to start getting truth about UFOs, ETs, allies, enemies in space. What is making the booms? Are we getting ready for the magnetic fields of the Earth to change? Or is it something else even more incomprehensible, such as a secret war that is going on our planet, underground and above in the atmosphere, related to a war, a secret war that is even taking place between another dimension and this one? That's how big the chessboard is now for all of these stories. And I hope that you will keep joining me and that we can sort of keep evolving together, trying to put the puzzle pieces into clearer and clearer pictures, knowing that some of us really are trying to report the truth, no matter what is happening in that geopolitical landscape out there that has been in turmoil and has created a deep state, in many ways, of chaos since the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And with that, I would love to get your questions.
So our first question tonight is in regard to the booms. Are there any particular times of year when the booms seem to be more prevalent?
It's a really good question, and my best answer after 6 years is this. I have reported enough to realize that in Fort Knox, Kentucky, for example, I expect there will be boom reports in the July area. Has been every year. Salem, Massachusetts, fall. I think of Salem, Massachusetts as having booms, even a big flash that was caught in a security camera. No weather. There was absolutely no weather, and yet there was this blast of whited out the camera, and then you heard this massive boom. And I had that video in a link on Earthfiles up until about, I think it was about a year ago. It had always been there, and this is one of the lessons that all of us need to learn. When you've got a really good, powerful evidentiary video, don't rely on the URL links to last over time. We all need to download them, put them in a format that where we can always upload them. And from now on, I've been doing that. But I lost that link. I tried to get the news. I called back to where there was a news department, and they had lost the video as well. So I'm testifying to what had been at Earthfiles for about 5 years, showing this big blast of white light. Well, Salem and that whole area, Providence, Rhode Island, and the water, it has had lots and lots of these strange booms and some of the lights in the fall. When you go to the Northwest, lots of booms in the Northwest and coming down California, various aspects of California. I would say that the West Coast of the United States has had booms reported off and on throughout the year. And so there have been cycles, and I guess the bottom line is the booms have been reported pretty much through the 12 months, but there are definitely geographic areas where there are cycles in seasons, such as the ones I've just described. And for those of you, wherever you are, if there is anybody tonight who knows someone or they themselves have been a witness not only to the sound, whether it's coming from above like a compression wave, or from below like something hitting from below, that's accompanied by a bright flash of light. I'm very interested in learning more details about those specific cases, and write me at earthfiles@earthfiles.com. Okay, another question.
I'd like to thank Cherry Michelle and Angie65 for their super chats. And one of those questions is, what do you make of implants that have been found in some abductees?
My first experience with the whole issue of an alien intelligence implanting something in humans goes all the way back to working with Bud Hopkins. When his book Missing Time came out, and I think his book was 1979, my film A Strange Harvest about the animal mutilations came out in 79. So Bud Hopkins and I ended up being invited to speak at a whole lot of conferences and radio and television back in the year 1980 and going on through the 80s. But he and I were, at the beginning, we were especially juxtaposed because I had this body of work on the animals and he had it on abductions, and we were sort of paralleling and comparing evidentiary notes and what we were finding in forensic investigations. And as that decade went on, for those of you who are familiar, Bud Hopkins was one of the first to report the implants, scoop marks, and it became a subject in which we were all discussing at conferences. And that the evolution through the 80s led up to probably one of the most interesting meetings that I ever attended. I believe the year was 91, and it was in the, I think it was Boston, Cambridge area. And there was a group of us who met, and the whole subject was implants and physical interactions with people in the human abduction syndrome. And there was a professor there, a microbiologist from a major university in the United States, who is to this day asked not to have his name or institution identified. But he knew and knows what he was talking about. And he did one of the most thorough and detailed presentations about an implant that he was able to study that was down in a person's foot. I believe it was a toe. And the part that I still remember vividly is when he got to the part of doing the analysis of a little, it was about the size of a half of a grain of rice, very small. And he showed in a photograph that it looked like the tissue of the toe, and yet it was separated like a little island in the tissue somehow. And when he did an energy dispersive spectroscopy on, which is looking at elemental composition, he found that this little tiny, we'll call it sort of separated from the tissue but looking like tissue peas, that it was identical to the human flesh surrounding this, but that whatever it was autonomous. It was like an island, which he didn't understand at all. But at that meeting, after his presentation, I remember that there was a whole new discussion. Could we be dealing with advanced intelligences who know how to extract the very elemental composition of tissue that we're made of, and then put it into some kind of advanced technology that they have, turn it into download, upload, transmitter receivers, implant them into human bodies where it wouldn't matter if you were on X-ray or MRI, you would never find these implants. How was this found? It was because the person, the abductee, remembered the interaction with non-humans and remembered something happening to their toe. And it was in the context of remembering an interaction with non-humans that led the original researchers to find or want to have something. And then it was a process of both a medical doctor doing some kind of an examination and then going to this microbiologist, and the microbiologist doing even more refined and sophisticated studies that brought them into this realization that there was something that was autonomous but was made out of exactly the human body tissue. And that was the turning point for a lot of us. That in the beginning, the implants were more in the category of our thinking that if you put a monitor in animals, like National Geographic has done for decades to go out, where you're tracking from a satellite or an airplane, that's the way we were thinking. Then this was so sophisticated, but so hidden. Something that could be put into the human body and could not be easily found and wouldn't be detected meant that whatever did this did not want humans to find it. And that's what led to the questions. Well, what kind of information is it uploading or downloading? Those questions are just as valid today now as they ever were. And I'll take one more question, and because I know tomorrow's Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Diffuse56, for another great super chat. And Linda, we have so many fantastic questions. I'll let you choose.
All
Do
right.
you want one on Antarctica, booms, or animal mutilations?
Let's go with Antarctica.
All right. Let's see. Did anyone ever come forward from the party of scientists that went missing for a while in Antarctica, as told in your interview with Naval Officer Brian S.? And Alan says, love you, Linda.
Oh, thank you. I love all of you. Because, man, we need people who are trying to understand. So I'm just so grateful for everyone. Brian S., for those of you who have listened to the 2-hour interview that I did with Brian S., you know what a down-to-earth, very detailed, he's a retired Navy flight engineer, and that he sets the stage and the bar for the fact that the National Science Foundation has been sending in groups of people into Antarctica for a very long time, and that we have had military units, like in this C-130 that Brian S. was in, flying them to various places on that big icy Antarctic continent. But none of the military were ever aware of exactly what are these scientific expeditions for, about, what's being investigated. And as Brian S. and I have talked about, that he has been haunted in his life at the faces of those scientists that they picked up that seemed traumatized after they had disappeared for 2 weeks. And now today, I have heard from at least 3 solid whistleblowers who have also had, I'm going to say, assignments in Antarctica, and that I am beginning to understand that there is or are substantive details that if they could come forward and describe, we would all begin to understand that Antarctica is a huge archaeological scene. and that the archaeology that is at Antarctica, and I can say that with great confidence, is related to an alien intelligence that goes back millions of years. The scientists, the very fact that the National Security Agency guy called Brian on that weekend when he and his nephew and I and a friend had gotten together to talk about all things Antarctica, and that Brian then got that threatening phone call. We know that you've been talking with Linda Moulton Howe about your time in Antarctica, and I'm letting you know that we do not want you, and that there are others who do not want you talking about the missing scientists. And that I have put out various kinds of pleas in various media that I've done. If there was anybody who was on that expedition or knows anyone who was on that expedition, to please get in touch with me. I've never heard anything. Brian has never heard anything. And that is part of the haunting landscape that we're in, that real scientists are going on real National Science Foundation expeditions to Antarctica to apparently investigate the alien archaeology and technology that exists there. And yet the rest of the world is denied this truth. And I don't know what it's going to take to open it up in some official capacity, beyond the fact that the more you and I can exchange some of what I can learn and report, a lot of it I can't, because I'm just the reporter. I need the people who have the firsthand experiences to do valid and honest journalism. And the government knows that. That's why I've had so many interferences in my career with people that have talked to me and we're going to do a recording and we're going to put it on the record, and then the government shows up and threatens the people, and then I can't do the interview. It doesn't change the knowledge that Antarctica, we haven't heard the last of that story. And I really hope, even if there's somebody listening now who has firsthand information about the archaeology, the ancient archaeology in Antarctica, and they can communicate with me even through FedEx, I'm happy to do that. And I guess it's appropriate on this November 22nd, 2017, to close out this Earthfiles YouTube with both a sad irony and a hope. The sad irony is that I'm sitting in front of you currently, right now, being separated by government threats from people who simply want me to know the truth about an alien presence that E. Howard Hunt said to his attorney, Douglas Caddy's question, why was JFK assassinated? And E. Howard Hunt was going to prison. And all he said to his longtime old friend, Caddy, because JFK wanted to give away our greatest secret to the Soviet Union. And when Caddy said to Hunt, what is the greatest secret? And Hunt answered, the alien presence, and walked away and went to prison. And his old friend and attorney Caddy never saw him again. All of this, all of these facets, the Kennedy assassination, all of it related to our government trying to keep hidden knowledge from the public and the media about the fact that we're not alone in this universe, never have been, and there's an alien presence or presences on this planet, throughout this solar system, and throughout this Milky Way galaxy and beyond. and that it's high time that we learned about it. So the sad irony moves to hope. And on this Thanksgiving, I'm so grateful that we are still able to communicate with each other, and that my hope is that as we evolve through the remainder of this year into 2018, that 2018 we are going to be able to have these Earthfiles YouTube discussions about more and more breakthroughs about UFOs and ETs, breakthroughs about what really is behind all these booms, breakthroughs about what is really in Antarctica and beyond. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.